I think the companies that are able to be long-term minded as much as possible have a competitive advantage, and that's always been something that I think I strive to have, with Chipper, and I think it's also true that there's always times when you have to navigate accordingly, and different times require different adjustments. I think at the heart of that statement I made was really access, right? For us, price and cost is a barrier in our space. The more expensive it is, the less people that can use it. And Chipper was the intent for our businesses to have as many people participate in formal financial services as possible. So removing that barrier, and by the way, Chipper is still fee-free for local domestic payments in the country we're available in. We don't charge fees for sending payments to Chipper in your local countries. That's still true. And I think at the heart of our focus on access is how to provide the best quality services with the lowest barriers to participation. The times then were more favorable for doing capital intensive things, raising a lot of capital and being aggressive in different areas. Times now are more aligned with capital efficiency. Capital is more expensive, less money going around, so you need to adjust accordingly. And we've been exactly as compliant with that as any other company has in terms of looking at every cost area of the business, being efficient, making sure that we're being as thoughtful about resources as we can, and still doing that with a long-term mindset. Like I keep telling everyone on the team and my leadership team that we still have to think about Chipper in 10 years, not just in 10 weeks or whatever time frame. People who are doing things in short-term viewpoints think about things. So in any company, in particular the leadership team is uniquely the only team that has to think about things in terms of now, but also in the long term. Otherwise, what are you doing if it's just for a quarter or a month? So our North Star hasn't changed. Our ambition for the business hasn't changed. Its impact on what I think we can be hasn't changed. But obviously to better navigate these times, which are, I think this has been probably the most challenging stretch of time in the financial markets for many businesses since I think 2008 or even before. So you have to adjust accordingly, and you need to make the necessary adjustments to be well positioned to go through that period and come out stronger. Yeah. And I feel pretty good about the changes that we've made. Africa has always had its challenges in terms of operating in it. There's always been that very well known haircut that you get for being an African company, right? It's like the additional risk. You get questions, people asking you, what about civil wars? What about this? What about that? And you're like, okay, and so that's always been there. That didn't start 2 years ago. So we've always had to deal with those things. I think in many ways the bar has only been raised higher from what was really a difficult place for a lot of businesses doing work in Africa have had. But also I think at the same time, I'm very optimistic naturally as a person. And I think I've seen a tremendous amount of change and appreciation and excitement around the African fintech space and African tech space in general in the last year, 2 years. I think there was a time when every other week there was a company in Africa raising money. And that wasn't, Paystack or Flutterwave or Chipper. That wasn't the case in 2018. You remember this. I mean, when we started Chipper, Majid and I, the only companies we'd heard about raising money at the time were Flutterwave. Literally, even Paystack hadn't raised money yet. And it was just such an unknown thing to tell someone that there's this thing that you can do in Africa that is not M-Pesa, but is still financial services. So we've come such a long way. And even if it feels like this last year and a half has been very, very hard, I think it's still net a much better place than we were in 2016 or 2017. Yeah. So overall, I'm super optimistic. There's unique challenges. You talked about the Naira devaluation. I think currency fluctuation has always been an issue in Africa. That's something that we've had to deal with from day one. I think it's only probably become more prevalent. Yeah. But that's part of what we're building to solve for. Right? Those are the challenges that we're looking at as opportunities to fix. I try to sort of optimize more for what do we know ourselves, what are we seeing in the marketplace, what are we learning from our users, and what are we trying to iterate accordingly with. There's a tremendous amount of value to be created and built with businesses in Africa, and especially in our space. We're moving money for millions of people. Businesses rely on us. People rely on us to make purchases for things that they couldn't have done otherwise via our cards. Via stocks, we give people a chance to invest and save and access other assets. Those things are very, very hard to do. We know because we've done them. It's such a difficult product to put out there. So therein lies a tremendous amount of value to be created if you can do it. I think vis-a-vis user acquisition in Africa, I mean, African consumers, I think, are just as exciting a consumer to serve as any other market in the world. There's a tremendous amount of intent and ability to interact with online goods and the global economy. And if you create a medium for people to do it, you'll create a tremendous amount of value. So I don't think any particular way about African consumers being less valuable to invest in aggressively vis-a-vis user acquisition. I think it's just about doing it in how it makes sense for your business and being smart about it. And definitely, when capital was cheaper, you can be very aggressive with user acquisition, with market entry. Those things are very expensive. Right? Getting into a market, getting a license, setting up a team, integrating with banks and telcos. That's a high capital intensive endeavor. Doing it across 10 markets is 10 times more expensive. Acquiring a bunch of users, those things are all expensive. So you definitely want to do those things when you've planned to do them in a way that the capital that finances that is not as costly as it could be at another time. Yeah. But I still think there's a relevant amount of value to be seen and to be acquired from supporting and serving African consumers. Yeah. And investing in that, we will never stop doing.